How much should you pay for the honor of drafting Ashton, Jeanty? What do we do with Travis Hunter? And everything you need to know to get ready for your 2025 Dynasty rookie drafts on this episode of the Sharp Angles podcast. What is up, everybody? This is the Sharp Angles podcast. I am Raymond Summerlin, and we are here to talk about, I guess, our last little piece of draft coverage coming out of the 2025 draft. It's a Monday. We're recording this on Monday afternoon. We're all rested up. Some of us on this podcast slept way longer than we expected to, right through our alarms. It might have been me, and we are ready. We are ready to party. And if we're talking about rookie drafts, if we're talking about fantasy football, we're only going to talk to one person, and that is my friend Rich Hribar. How are we doing, Rich?
We're doing good. It was definitely you that slept through because I have kids. If you sleep through an alarm, guess what? There's a backup alarm. Usually, that usually goes off before your real alarm is.
This
is
true.
There was a story here a couple weeks ago, in the middle of the night. Like our youngest, we have an 8-year-old, and he walked into the room. And apparently, didn't even wake my wife or anything. Just stood over her like a goddamn vampire. And she woke up and I thought she was gonna punch him, like just self-defense, reflex, because who knows how long he was standing there, right? Just looking at like baby Stewie. I don't know if he was contemplating some Stewie type activity or what. Dude, it was because you're in the middle of a sleep, you just wake up, there's a person over, you don't know what's going on, man.
That's wonderful. Just needed some water. What do we use your voice? Voice.
Yeah. Didn't tap her, nothing. Just stared at her like he's a Steeler soul, in the middle of the night.
Yeah, no, Rich is right, and I don't even have to deal with the dog in the morning, and so there's no backup. There's no backup to my alarm. But I will say I was a little tired coming out of draft weekend. Fun draft weekend though. A lot of content up on the site at Sharp Football Analysis. We've got draft grades, we've got most and least valuable draft classes. We've got breakdowns of all the round 1 picks, day 2, day 3 fantasy breakdowns, and most importantly, for the purposes of what we're doing here today, we have rookie rankings from Rich Hribar. Those are available as part of our fantasy football draft kit, which, by the way, you can get $5 off of our fantasy football draft kit using the promo code SHARP5. That's the number 5, not spelled out altogether. SHARP5. You can get $5 off our draft kit. Get you our rookie rankings. If you're doing a dynasty startup, get you our dynasty rankings. Projections are already up there as well. Regular redraft rankings. There's a whole lot already there. A whole lot more to come if you are somebody that does these rookie rankings, rookie drafts, and then wants to do redraft later. A whole lot of coming for that. In-depth tier write-ups on the rankings of every single player, team previews, a ton over at the draft kit. Head over to sharp.football, look at our draft kit, see what we have to offer, and I'm sure you're going to like it. And again, you get $5 off using promo code SHARP5. Again, number 5 all together. But let's start talking about these rookie drafts and kind of some of the biggest stories. A lot of years we're talking about who we're drafting at 101. That is certainly not a question now. I don't know if you want to break the suspense and say who you ranked 101, Rich. Ashton Jeanty is the 101. There you go. But I think the question this year, given the kind of relative weakness, I would say, of this rookie class from a fantasy perspective, at least at the high end, I think that, we can get excited, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these round 2, round 3, round 4 picks, and maybe taking a lot of shots on that, hoping you hit gold. But when we're talking about the top of the draft, there's a relative weakness there. And so I think the better question is not, obviously who are we taking 101, but how much are you willing to pay to get that 101? And will it even work out? I'll just full disclosure, I've recently offered the 105 and the 107 for the 101, and I doubt that gets it done. Right. But that's just what I have to offer, and I'm going to offer it and see what happens. That's the level we're talking about. So how much?
You never know. Even if that gets turned down, it might spiral into a different conversation where that gamer says all right, I want those 2 picks and something else. You don't know. So it's don't be scared to shoot your shot.
Exactly.
Unless it's an affront on humanity, then don't do that. Don't be that gamer. But like you said, starting off with something at least hey, 2 future or 2 firsts, hey, Well, like, see what happens with the conversation, because like you said, there's just a clear divide. Even before the draft, we kind of knew that we were headed towards this territory where we have this one clear 101 player, and a lot of teams that are picking first, unfortunately, probably aren't a player away, right? Like, they're probably not an Ashton Jeanty away. It's a good start because one running back season, the positional leverage it can provide could put you just in the conversation of at least making the fantasy playoffs or being able to make some damage if you have a player that good. And I do believe Jeanty's one of those type of prospects. So, you don't have to completely sell out either if you're just in a complete rebuild, but, you definitely want to be looking at getting, multiple firsts at least. If you can't get some players too that came out last year, maybe some guys were disappointed in, like you can't get like, a Roma Dunze thrown into like multiple firsts, right? Like stuff like that. But I think this is such a clear situation though, where you should be willing to overpay to get Jeanty, because I think he's just that much better than the field in this class. So it is kind of, nebulous, in terms of like what your roster looks like, where you are as a franchise, and, how many teams are in your league and those types of things. Like, if you're in a 14-team league, especially, like, then it holds even extra weight, right? So he is just that clear player though, that you kind of just like, don't overthink it. Like, he's just slam dunk the best player in this draft.
Yeah, like if I was, like I said, in that 105 and 107, and if I was, Roma Dunze is, I think, a really good example. Like if I was, countered, I don't have Roma Dunze on the team. I don't remember. I have way too many dynasty leagues. That's something I need to clean up this year. Like there's way too many of those.
Well, just like a player you can sell as like having, like, it could go both ways. He was a recent first, like maybe hasn't quite lived up to that capital, but there's still some runway left.
Yeah, but like if I added that, it was 105, 107 Roma Dunze for 101. I'm still probably doing that, right? I hope the person that I'm trying to do this deal with is not listening. But like I'm probably doing that. That's the value of this 101. That's the value of Jeanty. You already have your rankings out for redraft. I believe you had him as your RB8. Am I right about that? And remembering, like, that's the level we're at already as a rookie.
Yeah, that's the ballpark. I think like he was like, 6 through 8 in that range. I think depending whether it was PPR. I mean, we didn't even talk about too. Like, this is just the player. I mean, then the spot he landed in, falling into a Pete Carroll offense and a Chip Kelly offense. Like, we know that this guy is going to be a bell cow. Like, he's going to get the football a lot. And the name of the game is opportunity, right? And if we have a player at this type of talent level that could also walk into a situation, we're talking maybe getting, 300 plus touches as a rookie, that's just already puts him into a caliber of fantasy player that has a safe floor and then a high ceiling. There just aren't that many of those types of players, and that's what's able to kind of separate him and give him that like really sound projection. There are things you could tear down about the Raiders landing spot too, right? As well, like the offensive line is still not great. He was probably a reason, why they weren't able to upgrade their offensive line, because you invest capital at, pick 6 into a running back, but they add Geno Smith. Like, this is a team that's going to be better and more competitive than they were a year ago as well.
And he also fits in, and this is going to dovetail into our next one, but he fits in with my theory on how I'm going to build I want young running backs and older wide receivers on dynasty teams. Like, I want to draft running backs and trade for wide receivers. Now, obviously that's not like the end all be all. Like, if there's a wide receiver that you really like that slips, you're obviously going to take him. Justin Jefferson was a great example of the Puka Nacua. Like, there are lots of examples of that really working out, for sure, and lots of examples of really good wide receiver picks in rookie drafts. So it's not a end all be all, but in general, if I have like a tie, I'm going to draft the running back because I want the young running back. I want the running back on his rookie contract with the best opportunity, I think, to get touches. We'll see how that changes now with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and, some of these older running backs. But in general, that's what I want. And I want to then use those running backs to trade for wide receivers, right? Like, that's my goal. And I think that in this draft specifically, especially after we get out of the first round, you're going to see a lot of that happening. Is that instead of taking shots on the second and third rookie round wide receivers, in those picks, I'm just taking as many shots as possible at these running backs and just seeing what sticks, because the wide receiver depth is just really, really underwhelming, would be what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. The one other thing we didn't even talk about, because we're talking about the actual rookie class, is that for this being kind of a Pantheon level running back class, or at least it was considered as good as 2017, is as good as the 20, I think it was 2021, the Jonathan Taylor year with everybody. The existing running back landscape that appeared to be fragile actually kind of got through unscathed. which is a really kind of a solid marriage for like actual overall dynasty rankings in general, which I went and updated. I added all the rookies to the actual dynasty ranks. And so it was kind of a best of both worlds where these rookies came and they landed typically for the majority in spots where they were able to have increased value. And the guys that were kind of like, all right, this player looks a little fragile, they ended up holding on to their value as well. So it did work out pretty well for this being as good of a class as it was in general. I think a lot of that has to do with like day 3 ended up being kind of weird. I think after round 4, some of the running back picks ended up being really kind of weird the last couple rounds.
Yeah, it was strange as I would go through. You had your pre-draft write-up for all these guys. By the way, that's part of the draft kit as well. I would highly recommend you go and read Rich's write-up. We've got them all in one, nice little PDF that you can go through at your own leisure. And so you can read about kind of all of these players. And as I would go through like where you had them ranked, like the NFL was jumping all over those rankings. Like a lot of times, and that was true of like, if you look at Dane Brugler's work at the Beast, which again, recommend that. Love Dane Brugler. You would go through and you would say, okay, well, the NFL is really all over the place. I mean, RJ Harvey is a great example of
Right.
kind of this, where he went. There are lots of RJ Harvey fans, so I'm not saying that like it was like a surprise or a shocking pick.
It only takes one team.
It only takes one team. But like him going where he went ahead of lots of other guys, you go, that's interesting, right?
I mean,
And so
almost nobody
kind of
had almost between even the 2 Ohio State guys. I don't think almost nobody had Judkins over Henderson.
Yeah, Judkins over Henderson was really surprising. Henderson was mocked into the first round a lot, and to have Judkins go over him is really surprising. But to that team fit idea, like if you're asking Cleveland with Jerome Ford and now Dylan Sampson, because they did draft Dylan Sampson later, which of those two guys would fit better with what they need, Judkins or Henderson? The answer is probably Judkins, right? And so it's not that surprising in that context. It's just surprising kind of the way that it fell. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Cleveland's draft,
like you said. And
was there anything else interesting about interesting about Cleveland draft? Anything interesting else they did?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Yeah, and then you brought up the wide receivers, and especially the day 2 into day 3 wide receiver picks just ended up being kind of largely as overwhelming as I think we worried about coming in, where we thought the running back, the depth of the running back class was a strength of this rookie class. The wide receivers, we were kind of looking for more like landing spots to kind of provide some clarity for those secondary, third tiers and beyond. And we just did not get a lot of that. Even some of the guys that were trade up, like think about like a guy like Isaac Tesla, right? Like, a relatively exciting guy from an athletic stance, falls into a good team, but like, and the team trades up for him, the Detroit Lions, but like how generally, like, is it going to vault him up getting the wide receiver 3, maybe the 5th target on the team? Like, for a guy that's going to be almost 24 years old as a rookie, like it's just a really tough spot to say like, yeah, I'm going to vault that guy like way up. And I'm like, going to be like really excited to spend a 2nd round rookie pick on him. Like that just really kind of played out in general. Like, even a guy like Jalen Noel, a guy like he had a very strong contingency. You feel good about the landing spot, but also like it is kind of a spot where you're like, all right, he landed in a spot with his teammate Jaden Higgins. They already have an alpha established in Nico Collins. What happens with Tank Dell when he comes back? They're just like, there was just a lot of that. Luther Burden going to the Bears, right? Like it's just a lot of those type of landing spots to where the wide receivers, like you said, is just all encompassing. You're just like not thrilled to click a lot of those names.
Yeah, you have Trey Harris ahead of Luther Burden in your rookie rank. Like it's just one spot. It's not like not like he's way ahead. But that when we're talking about like those two players, maybe even how like they're viewed, even in like draft capital sense, it wasn't like a massive difference, but it was a difference, right, between those two guys. But Harris is just going to a much better spot for him to get year 1 targets. So that matters. Like that matters where we're going, and we'll see what happens with DJ
and from a fit, he makes sense, right? Like him paired with Ladd McConkey, it makes sense. Whereas you look at Luther Burden, and we're trying to kind of figure out. I made the comment during the draft, like I kind of hate the Luther Burden draft pick for everyone there, because we were hoping Roma Dunze in year 2 was going to have access to more shorter targets, kind of like what we saw Ben Johnson do with Jameson Williams, right? Like midway through the year, Jameson Williams wasn't just the deep target; he got efficient targets as well, and we were hoping Adunze could tap into that, and he still can. We're looking to see, like, does DJ Moore get like that Amon-Ra St. Brown usage? Does he turn into like a 50-50 slot player versus outside player? They drafted Colson Loveland, who is going to get targets in that intermediate area of the field. So Luther Burden, who projects to be largely a primary slot type receiver, it feels like it's just it's great for real life for the Bears and Caleb Williams, but like from a fantasy stance, when we're talking about counting stats, it's really hard to diagnose now. Like, is there just too much overlap here to where we can get excited, where it's like just very clean? Trey Harris playing at Justin Herbert, playing outside and add McConkey inside. Pretty clear cut what's going to happen here.
And even first round receivers with, Ibuka going to the Bucks and Golden going to the Packers, which the Packers part of it, they very clearly wanted a receiver. Obviously Christian Watson is going to miss a lot of time and is in the final year of his deal. So, that story might be told for the Packers. And so there is a path there for him, but this team just also doesn't throw a ton, or at least didn't last year. And they still have a ton of receivers. We talked about it on the podcast we did on Saturday with Ryan, is you can go way down that receiver group and find guys that you're like, yeah, this guy's fine. And so he's not landing a good spot. Ibuka, with his usage pattern, like, how is he going to fit with Godwin? It just, even at the very top of the draft for wide receivers, there's a lot of questions that you don't have as many of those with the running backs, or even if you do, you can at least make I think a better case to like early usage. So it's just it's a really interesting rookie class. One of the most interesting parts of this rookie class is Travis Hunter. And we kind of came into the draft not knowing how we were going to feel about him as much. I think you were always a little bit higher than consensus, just because you were like, what if this guy is just it, right? Like, and I think that was a great point. But now in the post-draft, we have the Jaguars coming out and saying, yeah, we plan to use this guy mostly at receiver. We're getting a more clear picture of what he is. Obviously, there is that long-term, uncertainty about where does he end up? Where does he play most? For his own, like, personal financial reasons, it makes a lot more sense for him to stick at wide receiver if he's able to do that and play mostly at wide receiver. And so I think that that's promising from a long-term future. And so, like, all of that, you put all that together, and I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised that you end up having him third and not second. You have him one spot behind a Marion Hampton, who I love. Like, I'm not like criticizing that idea, but I thought you might have Hunter second. And I wonder how difficult was that decision for you?
I would still have no pushback if like anyone had him second, like, right? Like, I think that's how close it is, right? I think that, 2 through 4, if I'm not really going to push back if you have Tet McMillan there, because that's the next conversation I guess we can kind of steer towards, is like the two receivers.
Yeah.
But, like you, I am someone that likes to use my rookie capital on these guys that project that be like 3 down running backs. And that's how I view Hampton, right? Like, especially with the capital he got and then the landing spot he got. Now, there is like the year one Najee Harris factor, and could Najee play himself into that like mid-season contract? Like we saw happen with James Conner, right? Like James, it's like, oh well, Trey Benson only has to deal. He only has to deal with 1 year of James Conner, right? And then it's free, and then he gets the mid. Jonathan Brooks was the same way. 1 year of Chuba Hubbard, and he's free, and he gets that contract extension. So that does exist in the range of outcomes potentially, but. So I just, like I said, I value the leverage that those elite running back seasons can provide in an individual fantasy season. And you saw it again with Saquon last year. I mean, there's a lot of gamers that spent 101s on Saquon, 5 years ago that were like, oh, I didn't really feel like I've gotten my 101 return, even though you did. But then you see like just the when you have one of these seasons you run into, just the difference it makes in an individual outcome. And one of those is arguably worth potentially more than multiple wide receiver 2 seasons, right? And that's the one thing I do say with Travis Hunter, and I love the landing spot for him as a wide receiver. We know he's going to play wide receiver early. It's the thing I brought up in the outlook, right? Like, is he going to impact Brian Thomas Jr. in a way that we've seen Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, and AJ Brown do, or is it just the inverse? Does Travis Hunter become that guy? And I do kind of think that Travis Hunter becomes more the volatile wide receiver 2 in the marriage of those 2 players. I think he's gonna be really good, and I think they both can coexist. But I do think when you look at like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, there's a clear wide receiver 1, and there's a guy that can have wide receiver 1 weeks, but is more of a wide receiver 2. Same thing with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Same thing with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, right? And that's kind of where I separate them. And that, I think if people want to use that to kind of separate Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter, I think that's more than fair as well, because Tet McMillan is walking to a spot where he could command a 25% target share year 1. He's going to project to be the future alpha of that offense. So if you're using that as kind of a runway too, I still have Travis Hunter splitting hairs above him because I just don't want to cap Travis Hunter in the sense of like, he could just be a special player. Like, and again, that's kind of in my whole process with Travis Hunter is like, this guy has done nothing but reinforce that he is special. So like, why kind of, discount that? So if you're saying I am discounting that by moving him from, 2 to 3, so be it. But if you do want to take him 2, I think by all means swing away.
And we also, with Ted McMillan, we have to consider that they just signed Hunter Renfrow. So it's a big important thing that needs to go into our math here. One more interesting player, and this is not as interesting in one quarterback leagues, but I think it's much more interesting in Superflex leagues, right, is Cam Ward in Superflex, because we have a quarterback who is not a running quarterback, but can run a little bit, who went 101 overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of situations in Superflex leagues, that's your 101, right? Like that's who we're talking about. And you have him 5th in Superflex, and I think that that's 100% fair. And it's just, I think it speaks a lot to what our expectations are for this quarterback group. And also, like I said, Cam Ward can run a little bit. I don't think we really expect like higher in running seasons from him. And then the difficulty, if you're not that guy, if you are not Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson, like the difficulty of really delivering consistent quarterback 1 seasons, it's so much more difficult. I think it speaks a lot to both who he is as a player, and then also kind of what we view just as quarterback class in general.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to Cam Ward, it comes down to kind of your roster needs and where you're picking and how much you feel like the necessity that you have to push for him. I mean, if you're in Superflex and you're on the clock on 102 and you have just a terrible QB room, you're probably going to be incentivized to take a shot on him, right, and add him to the room. I also think if you're in a Superflex league and you're at 102 and you don't need him, you should be looking at every roster that needs a quarterback and saying, hey, come get your guy. I got a guy for you right at the top. But ultimately for me is that what you kind of diagnosed is trying to find the marriage of how much was he vaulted up to 101 by default of the class and then archetype for fantasy. And this is a player, I think if you're hoping for at a ceiling outcome, he ends up like on that CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert like spectrum, right? And he can give you seasons like that. But that also is an example of like how volatile that archetype is when they don't throw a lot of passing touchdowns. And that's where I think that Cam Ward's going to be. I think he's going to have a few QB1 seasons, or at least the potential to have QB1 seasons, but more or less he's going to be in that like guy that's going to be more of a 2 QB Superflex guy that can moonlight as a QB1 in a given season where he runs hot in the touchdown department. So on a blanket like outlook where your just roster's fine, because the other thing we've seen now is that NFL teams are ejecting faster on quarterbacks when they don't deliver early. And that's, I think, because it used to be just like take the quarterback, he's currency in Superflex leagues. And that has kind of started to bite gamers a little bit, especially in recent years. I mean, we go back, just look at the last like 5 drafts. I mean, we had Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones completely get eviscerated as round 1 quarterbacks, like in terms of draft capital, even in your Superflex leagues, dead. Kenny Pickett, dead as a round 1 quarterback. And like, we're talking like year 1, year 2, like just blown up. Anthony Richardson was my number 1 mover. We did the show on it. Like no quarterback moved further down in Dynasty rankings than Anthony Richardson, right? Than this offseason. Bryce Young got benched 3 weeks into his second year. Like we recouped some life on Bryce Young, but like it still exists in our brains. Like, is he going to get a second contract in Carolina? It still might not exist. We're in year 2 with Caleb Williams, and he's got Ben Johnson. What if he doesn't rectify a lot of the things that we saw that were shortcomings for Caleb Williams in year 1, right? Like we're seeing teams move on either. So I even think that the old tried and true saying like, hey, these QBs are currency, there's a little more fragility in that in the way the NFL is operating too as well. So I do think, like I said, if you are in 102 and you feel like I need a quarterback, you can do it. But I look at it from like a 10,000 foot view. And I do think the other guys, I think are just general, better picks to take outright that can impact individual fantasy seasons.
I do think it's important to note that all of those people are still alive. They are.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think that's an important note. But from a fantasy perspective, sure. Speaking of like the rest of the class, like Dart, I mean, we'll see what you're doing with Dart. You do have him in the top 10. I like Jackson Dart, like as a prospect. that is a tough
If
click
this
to make.
overall class was stronger, I think he would be lower in Superflex.
Yeah.
So like I have no problem. He's also the same conversation. If you're on the clock and you're just like, my quarterback room's fine, you should be shopping that pick. The team's like, do you need Jaxson Dart? Obviously, find those gamers where that's a marriage for their roster, and try to move down. But if you want to just say, nope, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to, take a Buka, a Loveland, a Warren, whatever is also on the clock in that area. But yeah, he's definitely a prospect that is from Agility. And we talked about it with Ryan. If you listen to the show on Thursday night, just the history, the hit rate of quarterbacks selected in that back end of the first round is just so lackluster and so volatile. Like, yes, you have the Lamar Jackson hit, and then even an Aaron Rodgers, if you want to go back to like 2005, but then the rest of the list is just terrible. I mean, Kenny Pickett, Jordan Love, you waited for, you had to sit on Jordan Love to year 3 to use him, but Paxton Lynch, Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, Brandon Whedon, Brady Quinn, Tim Tebow, Jason Campbell, JP Losman, like that's an awful list of quarterbacks, man. It's an awful list of dudes.
When Ryan said Paxton Lynch's name on Thursday night, like it unlocked like a core memory. I completely forgot that he existed. That is how short that run was on Dart. So all of that's true, and I think Dart has this extra fragility in that I would be very surprised if he starts in week 1. I would assume he's going to start at some point in the season. But even though they traded up for him as a first round pick, if the Giants don't work out, the guys that traded up for him, Dayball and Shough, are gone. Right. And so, like, as you're talking about, we see teams eject on these first round quarterbacks. He's not just going to be a later first round pick, which we know what the hit rate is on those guys. And we've seen teams that didn't get rid of their coach and GM, bail on Kenny Pickett, for instance, very recently. Right. And so, like, it's not even that aspect of it, but it's also like we could have a completely new organization and staff. They're not going to have the draft capital, unfortunately, to really like go after that unless they're just really bad. Right. And so, but like there's extra fragility there even for Dart. And I guess we don't need to talk about Shedeur Sanders, right? We're just gonna
not even the same way, because even in Superflex, I mean, because Shough's probably the only guy that you would have mild like to say like, what are we doing with him, right? Because he goes 40th overall on a team where you could easily say he's probably going to start this year. Like, he's got a realistic shot if Derek Carr's not playing.
Absolutely.
Right?
But no, I'm not. If you saw my face if you're watching on video and saw my face, that's what Rich was reacting to. My face was not doubting that he would start this year or make starts this year. That was just the disgust of like, that's where we are. Come on.
But he's even worse than the Cam Ward Jaxson Dart section because he doesn't move at all. Like, he provides you zero rushing output. Like, you're going to get with Ward and a guy like Jaxson Dart, when you're going to get like top down end of the season rushing production, it's just on a weekly level. Those guys are going to be volatile runners. They're capable of moving, but it's not like a weekly thing with Jaden Daniels. We're counting on rushing production being a part of the weekly projection. It's one of those things. There's still going to be passing touchdown driven and passing production driven, and then whatever you get extra is just icing on the cake. That's why I brought up like Stroud, Justin Herbert, like that type of group of quarterback. And then if you want to like extremely extrapolate, maybe Joe Burrow, but like probably not. But Shough gives you absolutely zero. Like, Shough's a guy that in a given fantasy season like has to throw 30 passing touchdowns to be relevant, and that's to be like relevant as a streamer, like let alone not even to be like a guy who could be a QB1 because he's giving you zero rushing production. And then you talk about like the infrastructure of that organization right now. Like, there's not a lot to really believe in and say like, is he even like a long-term answer for them? Like, 'cause they could be picking in the top 10 next year.
I really like going through Matthew Stafford's rushing history. It's really fun reading. Like,
and when we've talked about this with Ryan in the pre-draft, like the pre-draft show at the quarterbacks, like, when was the last time like a completely stationary quarterback prospect like actually worked out? Like, the NFL has changed. Like, you just need to be a better athlete at the quarterback position right now, or you better be Tom F. and Brady, or like you said, Stafford. But like Jared Goff's like the last guy, and like people I think would still even question like how much like that's worked out. But like, and he was picked number 1 overall, let alone pick 40.
Over the last 4 seasons, Matthew Stafford has a total of 158 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. And I don't know, there's something about it. It just makes me yearn for the 90s. Like, I really like get some slap bracelets out. Keep doing you, Matthew Stafford. I'm
Imagine
really
if
big.
Dan Marino was a prospect now, man. The fight, the world, like what would happen, man?
Mel Kiper might die if Dan Marino was a prospect now, and he like fell to like even like the late first round. I hope Mel's doing
Like
well.
Philip
Mel had a
Rivers, like if Philip Rivers was a prospect right now.
how would his children eat? You know, it would be be crazy. I hope Mel's doing well. Mel had himself a weekend. I like old Mel Kiper. I hope he's feeling better. I hope he's feeling good. Let's talk about this tight ends. You brought up the tight ends. We've talked about like around the tight ends a couple times. You brought up Colston Loveland with Luther Burden. I don't think either tight end, all the two that we really care about for fantasy purposes, with Colston Loveland and the one, the only Tyler Warren, I don't think either of them fell in a good spot. But we also kind of have the weakness of this draft class, the back end of the first round, which is where you have both of them. You have Loveland ahead of Warren. I mean, both these guys, obviously Penn State guy. I absolutely adore Tyler Warren. I think Loveland's a fine prospect as well. Both of them got really good draft capital, but with where they're going, with the target competition in Chicago, the target competition plus just abject quarterback disaster that is in Indianapolis, like these are two more, like when we're talking about picks you don't feel great about when you click that button, these are two more that you just don't really feel that great about when you click that button.
But this is from like well, before I even get into like the actual tight ends, well, I'm in general the type of gamer that I don't like to spend a lot of my premier rookie capital on tight ends in general, because you need that player to be elite. Like just having an okay tight end in fantasy football means nothing. Like it absolutely means nothing. Like you need that player to do what Brock Bowers did last year, right? And that like, and unfortunately for both these guys, well, I think both are good players. Neither one of them were Brock Bowers level prospects, which makes it a little bit tougher. Now,
First
I will
of all,
say,
how dare you?
no, listen, get your Penn State bias out of here. But then when you in general, I'm a little bit lower on tight ends in a given year. Even if I did believe that these guys were Brock Bowers level prospects, I tend to discount the tight end position a little bit anyways, because of just how, the margin for error just kind of is, you either have a great tight end or you don't. Like that's it. There's no middle ground. Whereas you can have a guy like, Ted McMillan, like just give you like, he can underperform, but be like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. And that still is a guy that's going to like make weekly lineups and like be okay. Like it's baseline level wide receiver production is just a lot more functional than baseline level tight end production. It's just fantasy math.
I think to give an example of this, the example that really fits with Ted McMillan, you have Drake London, right? Who like had a very disappointing start to his career and was still in your dynasty lineups. Like that's where we are. And Ted McMillan could just do that and Thielen and Hunter Renfrow could get a bunch of targets, and we don't get the targets.
Not
we
even
want
counting Leggett, just the Xavier Leggett erasure.
We go straight past Coker, Leggett, straight to Hunter Renfrow. They could be getting targets, right? And like it's still not great. And he's the number 2 on that offense, and maybe Bryce Young isn't as good as he was at the end of the season. We see some regression there. And still, because he could catch like 7 touchdowns in a season and get a 20% target share, Ted McMillan would be your wide receiver 2 or 3, and you're fine with that. Whereas you can get random people to be your tight end 7 in a season, and it doesn't really matter. Like I think that's
Dalton Kincaid's probably the best example of like recently, you invest high pick, goes to the Bills, and he's been largely for 2 years not very useful on a weekly level in terms of your lineups. Obviously, Kyle Pitts now 3 years removed looks it's in a really rough spot right now.
All Falcons all the time.
But there's a secondary conversation to both of these guys too, which I find really interesting as what is that one, how much do you dock a guy for a landing spot that maybe isn't as good? And I've learned to not overly penalize guys because just the situations are so fluid, right? NFL rosters are so fluid. And if you're a tight end, like, because I think you could easily make the case that Loveland did land in a great spot, right? Like if the offense is that good, if Ben Johnson's that good, and he ends up being, his version of Sam Laporta, like that's actually really good for him. Because I think from a dynasty landscape, like he is probably a top 8 tight end in dynasty at minimum right now in terms of age, and that and same thing with Tyler Warren. Like Tyler Warren right now, we're not excited for him to catch passes from Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, but like what if they have a whole new quarterback next year and a new coaching staff, right? Like those things I've learned to say, like, all right, we're not going to penalize these guys too much, because when I've done that in years past, it ends up looking really bad year 2 and year 3. That's why I didn't like move those guys out of the first round. If you don't like them and you don't like drafting tight ends, that just puts the onus on you to say, like, all right, I'll kick the can again, shop around those picks. But that's what also coincides with these running backs, though, the RJ Harveys and the Caleb Johnsons, where you say, like, all right, the draft capital wasn't as great, but the landing spots are good. And in general, vaulting those guys up too highly has been a misnomer as well. So you have like these two areas that kind of like we're tiptoeing around with that area of rookie drafts this year. Like, how highly do you vault an RJ Harvey or a Caleb Johnson over one of those guys? Because again, we might not love the landing spots, but Colson Loveland was picked 10th overall. Tyler Warner's picked 14th overall. Like, these guys have significant runway for their careers to fail. Not necessarily the case. We love the landing spot for both those running backs I named, but if they do falter in year 1, year 2, how much runway do they get now on that rookie contract, right? And that's the same, like I love the spot for Caleb Johnson. It's easy to say. He just outside zone in Arthur Smith offense. He fits really good there. He can easily just take over the opportunities that Najee Harris had. It's a seamless fit. But what if he struggles in year 1? This is a guy that only had 1 year of production at Iowa. What if he does struggle or just doesn't play as good? And the Pittsburgh Steelers are in a spot next year where Jaylen Warren leaves the team, and we have a guy that was a 3rd round pick, and they don't have confidence in him. Do they add competition? Do they add a player? Like, that still exists in the range of outcomes. Same thing with RJ Harvey. I mean, Ryan expressed a lot of concern about RJ Harvey, and I forget the head coach's name at UCF, about the history of their running backs being a lot more productive than they were in the NFL. And so it's like, we do love those spots, but I do think you also have to be cautious over vaulting guys based on that landing spot too. Because again, things are very fluid. And if you've been playing Dynasty a long time, it's easy to look back at those landing spots and say, like, we thought this was the nuts and it ended up not being the nuts, right? And so you got to find that marriage, and a lot of that's going to, I think, just depend on where you are on the clock, like, and what kind of rosters you have, what you feel like your necessity is, or what kind of trade up and trade down scenarios you have that exist to you. That area of the rookie drafts is just going to be really nebulous this year.
Yeah, it's really tough, and I know that you struggled specifically with this Harvey and Johnson and how to order them. We talked already about how Harvey, like, you say, all right, the landing spot's really good, but also he doesn't do the things well, pass protection notably, that got Javonte Williams onto the field in Denver. He doesn't do that. So, like, if that's what they value, and that's why we kept seeing Javonte Williams get 2.5 yards on every carry that he did, is because he was just in there because they trusted him to do that. Well, then it's hard. Is RJ Harvey going to earn those snaps, or is he going to be stuck in like what we saw with Jaleel McLaughlin and
does he get goal line snaps too? Like, I mean, it's a 205-pound running back,
yeah.
And they did draft Audric Estime. And Audric Estime, as much as he didn't light the world on fire, what the Broncos asked him to do, he was actually highly successful. Like, he really only ran in short yardage situations, but he had actually one of the best conversion rates in the NFL of short yardage runs and turning them into first downs and touchdowns. So does he have that role? Like, is it just does he have a larger role in year 2 than anyone is expecting? I think that exists in the range of outcomes for Estime too. Now, on the other hand, with RJ Harvey, he goes pick 60. He's an explosive runner, and he lands in a Sean Payton offense. And not just a Sean Payton offense has been highly successful for running back production overall of our fantasy careers. I mean, this is a good defense. They're going to have positive game scripts. Like, it's really easy to say, like, just from where the state of the Broncos are right now too, it's just they're going to put him in his position to succeed as well. So you have kind of that push and pull.
Harvey feels like one of those, and it might just work out for all the reasons you just said. Like, there are lots of reasons why this just works out, but Harvey feels like we get tricked by draft capital with running backs a lot, it seems like. And Harvey feels like one of those.
CEH being probably the most, tried and true guy, right? Like, CEH is kind of the poster child because no one had him as their RB1 pre-draft that year. Nobody. And the second he went to the Chiefs, and the draft capital from him versus the other guys wasn't even significant, right? Like, he did get a first round pick, but he was the last pick of the first round. And, everyone got excited because of the Patrick Mahomes factor, the Andy Reid factor, and the history of Andy Reid's backs too, which also plays into, again, like, if you're over factoring in what coaching staffs have done for backs, we had the Lucy with the football pulled on us. And also CH is a great part of this conversation because what did CH suck at? He sucked as a pass protector. and it roadblocked him early in his career because everyone was like, remember, even in week one, remember the very first game CH played, they played Thursday night against the Texans, and he was awesome. He had a long touchdown and scored another touchdown, but he kept coming off the field every third down, and people were like, why is Darrell Williams playing? Why is Darrell Williams getting in right now? Why are the Williams guys getting in? It's like because he couldn't pass block. And is that happen here? So like, there are some things to be like a little bit where it's like, so I actually end up probably a little more cautious than some of the rankings you'll see. I did check. I saw JJ actually had him one spot lower than me. But again, if you need a running back and you're on the clock at like 109 and you're like, hey, I need production right now, because if you are picking 109, it means what? Your roster is probably pretty competitive.
Yeah.
And, maybe this is a guy that can come in and give me some usable weeks and starting weeks. You might want to use that and say, hey, if he sucks, so be it. I've made bad draft picks in this area before. I want to chase a little bit upside here. So that's why I said that that area of the drafts, I think, it's especially in super flex leagues, like 108 plus is going to be really the Wild West.
I'm old enough to remember a young man by the name of Daniel Thomas, who was drafted number 62 overall in the 2011 NFL draft by the Miami Dolphins, who had no running back to speak of at the time. And he was definitely that he was going to be the guy. And anyway,
and we had Keyshawn Vaughn a couple years ago.
I still love you, Keyshawn. Like, don't let anybody say anything bad about you. I'm still a fan.
He got into the first round, but he got in rookie drafts. He was like getting into the back end of the first round that year.
Who is the Titans back from the footwork back from
Bishop Sankey, but he had the capital too. Yeah, Bishop Sankey.
Bishop Sankey. Like, there's just a really long list of these guys, and that doesn't mean that Bishop Sankey was 54th overall. Like, it's all like in this range of the second round that we're talking about. There's just such a long list. That doesn't mean RJ Harvey's going to be that guy. I'm just throwing some caution to the wind is what I. Well, no,
you're going to see. You're going to see. I think there will rookie drafts or RJ Harvey could go like 104. Like I guarantee you, I would imagine there will be. We've done this before as fantasy gamers. That's why I just want to have like just like one, at least want to walk through the process of where we could be wrong, because it's easy to like for RJ Harvey purposes, even myself, like there's no player that moved up higher. There just isn't. Like there's no player that got a better in terms of pre-draft, expectations versus post-draft outcomes. There's just no player that had a bigger increase in stock.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how you could argue to take him over Judkins. Like that doesn't make, or Henderson. That doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah,
there will be leagues that happens.
Oh no, absolutely, you're right. But over the tight ends, like I get it. I understand. I feel like we should lay out the history and say, I don't know, maybe we should be a little cautious. Speaking of a lot of the other running backs that went, we saw a lot of guys go even on day 3, who we liked where they ended up. There's a long list here. Cam Scadaboo, Bishal Tootin, Jaden Blue, Dylan Sampson, Devin Neal, Ollie Gordon, Jarquez Hunter, DJ Giddens. Like there's a long list here. Anybody, you can make a case for a lot of those guys. Anybody from that list really stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those picks too do stuff to other players. Obviously you have the Tyrone Tracy, kind of impact as well. Even a guy like Tank Bigsby, right, who played well in the year 2, like he gets stunted. Those guys are easy to kind of diagnose. I also think too, just like the later round guys ended up being pretty interesting. We talked a little bit like Devin Neal becomes an interesting like 3rd and 4th round rookie pick now, right? Because Kamara's missed multiple games, in 4 of the past 5 years. Does he get a chance to play early to give you usable weeks as a rookie? Does he have doors open too if he plays well to have more, moving on as Alvin Kamara approaches into his 30s? There was Jarquez Hunter, becomes an interesting player too. If, Kyron Williams becomes a free agent after this year, what happens with, Blake Corum there, DJ Giddens, these late round guys, I think become the interesting dart throw guys, right? Ollie Gordon with Miami, right? Like these guys are the guys that become, I think, more interesting versus the wide receivers. I want to throw darts on those guys versus I think the wide receivers late in drafts. I just think this is a class where like Chimera Dikey, I'm not drafting this dude. Like I'm not drafting Ty Felton. Like these are just guys I'm not taking shots on, like especially versus the running backs in this class. Like I just don't see like you're going to get a lot of usable seasons out of these guys. Whereas like even if the running backs give you pockets of usable weeks where just like, hey, the depth chart cleared out and this guy's gonna have a 3-week run where he's just gonna be a volume-based producer. I think that those guys are just gonna end up running into more pockets of fantasy production than any, like when you look at these receivers that ended up with even some capital that you might even be able to like coax yourself into, like a Savion Williams, right? Like it's just really hard, I think, to push the button on those guys. I just don't see a lot of fantasy usefulness out of a lot of these from the wide receiver depth this class.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. And you didn't mention, I think my two favorite shots from there are Scattaboo and Blue. Like those are the two, if I'm really like, and you had Scattaboo of that list that I read, you have him ranked highest, and Blue, I think, is third on your list. Those are pretty easy clicks for me where I assume they will go. We'll see what the ADP ends up being. Scattaboo is a guy that maybe goes higher than we expect just because of his name value. We know how that happens in home league. So we'll have to see. I agree with you in like the middle part. And like, if you're in rookie drafts that last like 4 rounds, I agree with you. If you get beyond that though, I do think there are wide receivers that I am interested in clicking on. Like, I think we get through that group of backs that I'm interested in. And we get to like, if I'm talking about like your guys that you have ranked between 40 and 60, there are wide receivers there who I'm interested in clicking on. Alik Ayumanor, like that. I would rather have him than DK if I'm talking about Titans receivers. Keandre Lambert Smith, who, by the way, that's not a Penn State bias. He transferred out of Penn State. We're supposed to hate him. But like you talked about Trey Harris, Lambert Smith with his speed and kind of what he can do. It's probably going to be Trey Harris. That's that outside complement, that kind of Josh Palmer-ish guy to Ladd McConkey. But like, could Lambert Smith be that guy, especially with the speed? I think so. I like Jimmy Horn Jr. a lot. I think Jimmy Horn Jr. was probably pretty underrated, both by just draft analysts, to begin with. And so like, there are wide receivers in that later range. Like if your drafts go 5 and 6 rounds, there are wide receivers there who I'm interested in hitting on. But yeah, if we're talking 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, it's going to be a lot of running backs for me from that list that we talked about.
Yeah, I mean the two wide receivers I think in the 2nd round range that I think are worth kind of exploring, either conversation on or like would you draft them would be Jack Besh and Kyle Williams, be the two guys. I can be coaxed into Jalen Noel still a little bit, but I think those other two guys have larger runways to potentially be a lot more. I think their year one ability, I think they landed in spots where they're going to get year 1 targets, and then they landed in spots too where like the future is just very wide open. So like those would be two guys I would say like, all right, I could see some nibbles on these guys as well, especially if they fall on rookie drafts.
Yeah, Kyle Williams is really interesting to me because I just don't know what he like. What is he? Like how are they using him? I'm confused. I guess pour some out from Demario Douglas. I think
he could play though. So like that's,
yeah.
And a lot of other people believed he could play that know more than I do. So
no, absolutely.
And I'm a Drake May believer too. So
oh no, this is a Drake May podcast.
Yeah,
I think that's very clear that this is a Drake May podcast. I want that to be clear from the beginning. We didn't bring up Brashard Smith. Like you have to talk about him. Like what are we doing? You have to talk about him.
Well, listen, who amongst us hasn't drafted Darwin Thompson? Who amongst us didn't pick up Darwin Thompson on their dynasty roster? So
but no, like if I'm picking in the 5th round,
I think a lot of the later
round,
of the later round running backs, it's easy to make a case for. Damian Martinez ended up going in the 7th round, but landed in a spot where you're like, all right, well, if Kenneth Walker if they're not able to retain Kenneth Walker, does he have a better outlook as early as year 2? Like it's easy to make a case for a lot of those guys. Even Trevor Etienne. Like what if John Brooks just is never a thing again, like because of the early career injuries, right? Like, does he end up in a spot? Taj Brooks in Cincinnati, we don't want anything to happen to Chase Brown, but if something were to happen to Chase Brown, what if Taj Brooks ended up like all these guys ended up in some relative? I don't even like Jordan James. Like, I think that he was one of the weird picks as a complete Shanahan pick, but like, if something to happen, this is the 49ers backfield. Is there a spot where Jordan James now is starting games? That's why I said it's like easy to make the argument for these guys. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt going to Washington. Like it's really easy to say, even these 7th round running backs, it's easy to squint and say, yep, I could see it working out here.
Yeah, it's one of those drafts. I think that
except for Khalil Mullins, that was I don't know what's going on there.
And Donovan Edwards didn't get drafted,
no,
right? And that was Yes, that's confusing. That one we'll put that one in the confusing.
Raheem
Category.
Sanders didn't get drafted. There was running backs that was like, yeah, this guy will get off the board. But we also did talk about this running back class potentially cannibalizing itself, and it did for some of these guys, unfortunately. Just a numbers game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't actually dug too deep into the undrafted free agent list. In a previous life, I had to really pay attention to those signings, and I think it scarred me. I think it scarred me for life that I really had to pay attention to those. And I like that we get excited about them every year. And sometimes it does work out. To be fair, but we'll see where that goes. But that's about us. That's about it for us. If you want to see all of Rich's rookie rankings, you want to see his profile of all of these guys we've talked about, you can find in-depth profiles, all of that available in our draft kit, which you can get for $5 off right now using promo code SHARP5. That is SHARP with the number 5 all together. Get $5 off the draft kit. Go to sharp.football and you'll get, all that information. And on top of that, the draft kit, it's not just going to be rookie stuff. We've already got redraft rankings up.
And they're in there. The projections, the rookies are in the project. If you're not even curious to say, like, I'm not even a dynasty player, but I'm firing these BBMs that are open. Best Ball Mania 6 kicked off today. If you're wondering where the rookies sit in yearly ranks or what the projections look like, they're in there already. They're already up.
And you can go look at the Cleveland quarterback projections and see just Rich throw his hands just firmly into the air.
And I'll admit, I just had no idea how it's going to play out, but I wasn't going to project 4 quarterbacks. And right now, on the surface, I approached it where Kenny Pickett was the odd man out of the projections. So,
Super Bowl winner Kenny Pickett.
And which could not be true. That's a situation, but I ultimately came to the conclusion too that no matter what 3 you projected, it didn't alter the projections of the other players that much. So I was like, here it is. I'll settle on just one of these guys, the odd man out for a projection. Because I do believe we're going to see 3 quarterbacks at minimum start games for the Browns this year.
Oh, that's a fun. Yeah, that's a fun. Would we actually put it at 3.5? Would that be the over under?
It would be 2.5. You'd have to set it at 2.5, I believe.
2.5. Yeah, I'm taking over. I like at 3.5, I might take over. 2.5, I'm taking the over for sure. Because how do you sit a Super Bowl winner for the entire season? I don't even know how you would do that. But yeah, all of that's in the draft kit. Again, Sharp $5 off. Make sure you check that out. Head over to Sharp Football Analysis. Like I said, we've got a ton of post-draft coverage with every first round pick, write-ups for those from Rich. I did day 2 and day 3, looking at all of those guys as a whole and kind of the more interesting situations. We've got most valuable draft classes from Warren Sharp. We've got draft grades from Ryan McChrystal. We're gonna have a way too early mock as I hang up this podcast. I'm gonna go post a way too early mock for 2026 from Brendan Donahue, one of the best mock drafters in the world. So a ton over at Sharp Football Analysis. Make sure you go and check that out. And Rich and I'll be back to talk with you real soon.